This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations. Decisions made in Washington can affect your portfolio every day. But what policy changes should investors be watching? Washington Wise is an original podcast from Charles Schwab that unpacks the stories making news in Washington right now and how they may affect your finances and portfolio. Listen at schwab.com/WashingtonWise. When Donald Trump was still campaigning for office, do you remember what he said he was going to do about immigration? He talked about revving up the largest deportation operation in U.S. history. 2 months in, I'm here to tell you he has not done that.
You know, it's interesting.
I learned this from Michelle Hackman over at the Wall Street Journal.
The number of deportations is actually not that far above Biden levels as far as we can tell so far.
Trump's immigration policy, Michelle says, it's made for TV.
It just seems to be like they're doing a much more public job of arresting and deporting people and targeting very different people than the Biden administration was, which is catching a lot of attention, scaring people. And I think it's a purposeful tactic because they want a lot of people to self-deport.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. Because to me, I look at what's happening right now, and it feels like instead of delivering on mass deportations, Donald Trump is delivering on a kind of sick pleasure of terrorizing migrants.
They've been amplifying every deportation. They've been making a show of it. I mean, there was one raid that they went on where they brought Dr. Phil with them. And Kristi Noem was there sort of dressed up in military fatigues, but also, you know, with I think people were criticizing this sort of with a really full hairdo and face of makeup.
The images coming out of this White House are strange and disturbing. There's a so-called ASMR video of a deportation flight. It's created so you can be soothed by the clanking of chains and handcuffs. There's a clip of migrants getting their heads shaved before being carted off to detention. That one was reposted by Trump himself. And it's not just criminals getting threatened and expelled. In just the last week, there were reports of a 10-year-old cancer patient getting ejected from Texas, and then allegations that a German green card holder was grabbed at an airport, tossed in a cold shower, and violently interrogated.
Most of them are legally deportable, but it is a choice to go after them. And it's telling that they're going after these people, often because they're easier to find and arrest than people who actually often do have criminal records and sort of know how to hide from the authorities.
So is the wider message essentially, we're doing this thing?
I think the wider message, and it's not a secret, they say it on TV all the time, is if you're here illegally, you should be scared.
This weekend, as a plane filled with hundreds of migrants touched down in El Salvador and detainees got hauled off to a mega prison, it struck me how far this administration is willing to go to project an image. There was no due process for these people, just a flashy video posted to X. It looked like a sizzle reel for the immigration system to come, whether Americans want it or not.
I think that the people working in this administration are much more zealously passionate about immigration than most of the American people are. Stephen Miller is Trump's deputy chief of staff now. This man knows more about immigration than almost anyone in the country. He is finding lines of the law that I didn't even know exist. You know, he will assert that he has the power to do something, and I'll look it up and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's buried very deep in the law there. And he went and he found it.
Today on the show, how Trump's straight-to-video approach on immigration is stretching the Constitution. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around.
Planned Parenthood Federation of America exists so that all people can get access to the sexual and reproductive care and education they need to make informed decisions about their health. More than 2 million patients a year rely on the services Planned Parenthood health centers provide, like STI testing and treatment, birth control, gender-affirming care, abortion, cancer screenings, and so much more. Right now, all across the country, reproductive health care and rights are under attack from public officials who are out of step with the will of the vast majority of Americans. The constitutional right to abortion, control of our bodies, and the health care we need has been stolen from us. And now politicians in 47 states, yes, 47, have introduced bills that would block people from getting the sexual and reproductive care they need. Planned Parenthood knows that equitable access to health care, including safe, legal abortion, is a human right. Right now, Planned Parenthood needs your help to protect access to health care. Donate today by visiting plannedparenthood.org/protect.
When you check out at the pharmacy, you see the journey from idea to medicine, thanks to our intellectual property system, or IP for short. IP safeguards inventions, like a new way to prevent seizures or lower cholesterol. And IP supports competition from other brands, then lower-cost generics, which are 90% of prescriptions filled in the U.S. Innovation, competition, lower costs, thanks to IP. Learn more at phrma.org/IP works wonders.
Can we do a bit of a TikTok of where we are right now? Because it feels to me like your beat has really heated up in the last week or so. Like if I asked you to suggest when the heat got cranked up to 11 for you, where would you start the story?
I would start it the day Trump took office. I mean, right from the get-go, they issued all these executive orders that had little things tucked into them. There were 10 executive orders on immigration. Each one had like 8 sections. And each section, I was like, oh my God, they're going to do that. They're going to do that. They're going to do that. And it's slowly happened over time.
Give me an example of one of those little poison pills or whatever, however you'd phrase it.
So there was one tucked into an executive order that said they were going to bring back an immigrant registry. It's a law from 1940 that, in fact, does say anyone in the country illegally needs to register with the government, provide their home address, provide other information like their fingerprints. And if they don't, they can face jail time and a big fine. You know, older people actually can recall watching TV and seeing these ads on TV that would tell people, remember to register. And it was not just people here illegally. It was anyone who was not a citizen had to go register every year, provide their updated address. For the first time, Trump has decided to bring back that registry. And it's a pretty clear message. I mean, he's saying, come register with the government so we have your address and we can come deport you. And if you don't register with the government and we find you, then we can throw you in prison and fine you and also deport you.
So it's kind of a finger trap. It's like register, or if you don't register, also you're going to be kicked out.
If they find them, But yeah, it's just one more thing that they can do to sort of criminalize being in the country illegally to scare people.
Last week, you began reporting that the administration was going to use a wartime law that gives sweeping deportation powers to the president. It's called the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. And then just a couple days later, Trump did just that. So explain what happened here.
Yeah. So I, had some anticipation. This was another thing that was tucked into a day one executive order. So we knew that this was coming. We didn't know sort of when or what the specifics were going to look like. On Thursday, I started hearing from sources that this Alien Enemies Act proclamation was going to be imminent. And so I was on alert. I knew that they wanted to use it against Venezuelan Tren de Aragua members.
That's a Venezuelan gang.
Exactly. It's this sort of violent Venezuelan street gang that has started appearing in the United States in the last 2 years. And I should say, I mean, the gang is really violent. They have committed murders in the U.S. They've gone after police officers. I mean, they're, generally speaking, not good news. But it's obviously hard to know who is Tren de Aragua because there was such a large influx, such a large Venezuelan migration to the U.S. during the Biden administration. And a small number of these gang members came as part of that mass migration. It was a sympathetic story. They were fleeing from an autocracy. They've sort of been able to flip the script and say these people are violent. They're not good people. We're going to go after them. Their country isn't taking them back, so we've got to take extraordinary measures. It's become a good political message for them. And so I knew all along that they were going to probably want to use this proclamation to target Venezuelans. And that's exactly what happened. We heard on Saturday that a plane load, we didn't even know who, but a plane had gone from the U.S. to El Salvador. And soon after that, we saw this video that the Salvadoran president had posted of these people sort of getting unloaded off planes, getting their head shaved, et cetera.
Yeah, this video has production values. It was invested in. That's the thing that strikes me. It's like a trailer for a movie.
Yeah. I mean, the Salvadoran president is definitely, he has an audience, and his audience likes to watch TV.
Okay, so we have these migrants to the United States, people from allegedly Venezuela, now being sent to El Salvador. Why El Salvador?
So the Salvadoran president is a guy named Nayib Bukele. He himself is sort of a right-wing, slightly autocratic figure.
Some people have called him like the world's coolest dictator because he has this reputation.
Yeah, I mean, he's a young guy. He's always in these aviator glasses. He's pretty hip. He's in with the tech sector. One interesting thing he did is that a few years ago, he made Bitcoin a national currency of El Salvador. So literally, if you go to a coffee shop in El Salvador, they're legally required to take Bitcoin as a form of payment for your coffee.
This didn't really work out, though, right?
I don't think that it really has, except for the fact that it's created a huge Bitcoin industry in El Salvador, which I think is what he wanted.
And notably, something like 2% of the population of El Salvador is in prison now because he's come in and arrested so many people he says are gang members or organizing violently.
Well, yeah, that's the centerpiece of his whole agenda, is that he was going to throw all the criminals in prison, most of them without any kind of trial. He's thrown 2% of the country's population in prison. Can you imagine? I mean, 1 in every 50 people you know. And interestingly, what's happened is the country undeniably has become a lot safer. It's become a destination where people actually go on vacation now. It's a huge surfing destination. But on the flip side, for people who live there, for anyone who knows someone who's been thrown in prison, it's really scary because they have basically no recourse. Their loved one is in prison. There's no due process.
So we're sending migrants, basically outsourcing to El Salvador, a place with known human rights violations in its carceral system.
And Bukele, I mean, this is the story, is that he is interested in becoming closer with Trump. And at the very start of the administration, he actually told Trump, we'll make you a fair deal. Send your prisoners here. Send anyone you want here. We'll give you a good deal. You pay us just a little and we'll throw them in our prisons for you. That's exactly what happened.
Let's go back to the Alien Enemies Act. What is the justification President Trump is using here to throw these people out of the country and, in fact, throw them to a completely different country?
So the Alien Enemies Act is supposed to be a law, again, written in 1798. So it's a really old law. It was supposed to only be used at times of war to sort of either be able to detain or expel our enemies at times of war, and basically do something that might not be legal in peacetime.
It does not have a sterling history.
I was just going to say, most famously, It was used during World War II as a justification to intern Japanese people and even some Japanese Americans, which is not technically in the law, but was found to be legal by the Supreme Court.
But we're not at war with Venezuela. So what's the justification for using it against allegedly members of a gang?
They say that since they've designated this gang as a terrorist organization, that means we're at war with them. But Trump was asked about this over the weekend, and he said, he basically explained his thinking. He said, we're at war. And he said it's actually even more dangerous than a war because in wartime, you know who your enemies are. They wear uniforms.
Okay. So this all sounds very pushing the limits of the legal authority of the executive branch. So we have this plane full of people leaving the United States at the same time that the ACLU finds out about it and basically says, hold it, we need to bring this to court.
Exactly. And while that plane is in the air, a judge agrees with the ACLU and says, turn that plane around to give me time to decide whether this was a legal use of the Alien Enemies Act. He said that out loud in court.
Literally turn the plane around?
Literally. He said, turn that plane around. And they didn't. The plane kept going. It landed in El Salvador. Obviously, we saw the video. The next morning, I think even more notably, Bukele, the Salvadoran president, tweeted a meme that said, oopsies, too late. And it was retweeted by everyone from Secretary of State Marco Rubio to Elon Musk to other White House officials. They knew what they were doing.
After the break, did the Trump administration really just defy a court order?
Your data is like gold to hackers. They're selling your passwords, bank details, and private messages. McAfee helps stop them. Secure VPN keeps your online activity private. AI-powered text scam detector spots phishing attempts instantly. And with award-winning antivirus, you get top-tier hacker protection. Plus, you'll get up to $2 million in identity theft coverage, all for just $39.99 for your first year. Visit McAfee.com. Cancel anytime. Terms apply.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
Every day, thousands of Comcast engineers and technologists, like Kunle, put people at the heart of everything they create.
In the average household, there are dozens of connected devices. Here in the Comcast family, we're building an integrated in-home Wi-Fi solution for millions of families like my own. It brings people together in meaningful ways.
Kunle and his team are building a Wi-Fi experience that connects 1 billion devices every year. Learn more about how Comcast is redefining the future of connectivity at comcastcorporation.com/Wi-Fi.
I don't understand how the rule of law works when you have a judge ordering the federal government to turn a plane around and then that not happening.
I think it's the closest we've come to a constitutional crisis in a long time. The administration has made different protestations that have kept this from becoming a full-blown constitutional crisis so far. They've said, oh, well, it wasn't a written order, so we couldn't obey it. Oh, well, the planes in question were already over international borders, so it didn't apply. In the past, those are not precedents that anyone has really honored. And so we'll see how things go.
Well, also, you're in an American plane. Come on, guys.
Well, yeah, I would say every time in the past when I've seen a judge say someone has wrongfully been deported, the U.S. has brought that person back.
Do you think there's any chance these folks are going to be brought back?
The problem is we've deported them to El Salvador. El Salvador is an ally of ours, and they could so easily conveniently say, well, they're not in U.S. custody anymore, and El Salvador won't give them back to us. That's a real possibility. Another real possibility is that the administration could successfully argue to a higher court that they have the authority on national security grounds to use this Alien Enemies Act, and they have basically unchecked presidential power, and that would essentially override what has happened.
I want to pause for a moment here because in the last 24 hours or so, we've gotten a little bit of an idea of who the people were on this flight to El Salvador, the accused gang members from Venezuela. How much do we know? I understand it's limited. It's only a few people, but tell me what we do know.
Yeah, we've heard from a few families, and this is not my reporting personally, but people who have said people disappeared out of the blue. I spoke to a lawyer yesterday who said she had a client who had tattoos that the government suspected were gang-related, and so they kept the guy in ICE detention. He had a hearing on Thursday, and the government is required to bring this lawyer's client to the hearing because he's in custody. The guy didn't show up to his hearing on Thursday. The judge said, what the hell? Why didn't you bring him? He rescheduled the hearing for Monday. And over the weekend, this lawyer who I spoke to, her client basically disappeared. He was no longer in the detainee locator. She called the ICE detention center. They said he was gone, but they couldn't tell her where he'd gone.
So she suspects he was on this plane.
Well, finally, yesterday at the hearing, the judge asked, ICE where he had gone, and they confirmed that he had been sent to El Salvador.
Was this person a gang member?
Well, what's significant about the story is that he was planning to produce evidence at the hearing that he was not a gang member in support of his asylum claim, and they didn't let him make that case.
There seems to be so much focus on tattoos that people have, too. Like, there are multiple reports of ICE agents being like, let me look at your tattoos, and claiming that marks someone as someone who should be deported.
Yeah.
I find that alarming, too. Plenty of people have tattoos these days.
Plenty of people have tattoos. And I'm no expert, but it is based in some reality. TDA members often do have certain tattoos. For example, this is kind of a silly one, but apparently the Air Jordan tattoo, which some people have, is a known affiliation with TDA. But again, it's not a clear marker of guilt, and someone should have their day in court.
Yeah. So tell me where the ACLU's case stands now. We had this, order from the judge over the weekend, turn the plane around. The government ignores it. Administration members are sort of tweeting about it.
We had this remarkable hearing where a Justice Department lawyer came in front of the judge. The judge was asking all sorts of questions. I mean, the case is now all about, did the administration defy a court order?
And the administration tried not to show up, right? Like, they're like, oh, judge, we don't think you need to have this hearing because we're not going to tell you anything.
Oh, yeah. They sent a letter basically saying there's no point in having this hearing because we're not going to answer any of your questions. They also tried to get the judge removed from the case. Neither of those worked. So the hearing proceeded as planned. A DOJ attorney went and basically repeatedly refused to answer any questions, said this is a national security matter. I can't answer any questions whatsoever. The judge was not having it.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, the judge was so frustrated that he was reported to have told the DOJ, here's what I'm ordering you to do. Show up, give me this information by noon tomorrow. And I'm going to write this down.
Right.
Because clearly my oral orders don't mean anything to you.
Right.
Which would be a slap in the face in normal world, but sounds like just, an everyday Monday now.
It does seem to be a new normal that we're settling into.
What is the DOJ claiming here? You're saying they have national security concerns about releasing any information about the people that have been deported?
That's right. In this case and in immigration writ large, they're making a really remarkable argument, which is that the president has essentially unchecked power to control the borders. And that includes deporting whoever he wants. That includes suspending asylum laws because he doesn't like them. that's the case that they've been making over and over, and they've had some success with it because it's just taking time for these cases to wend their way through the courts. And so they're sort of going ahead with this theory in the meantime.
I mean, Steve Vladek, who's a constitutional expert, has argued that, no Supreme Court precedent remotely backs up this theory that Trump has unreviewable power over foreign affairs, including the right to detain and deport specific immigrants. So we just don't know. There's no evidence that this theory will hold up, essentially.
Well, clearly it's an attempt, and this is something that they have said publicly and privately. It's an attempt to bring this idea back in front of the Supreme Court to see if they can set a new precedent. And if they can't, they can't, but at least they've tried.
So what comes next in this case?
There are sort of two issues. I mean, first is the administration going to continue to defy court orders? It seems like there was one separate instance that was a little murkier, but where this woman who's a Brown University professor had her visa revoked at the airport and got deported. And a judge in that case also held the deportation for 48 hours, and she got deported after that judge's ruling. Now, in that case, DOJ said that was a mistake. They didn't have the judge's order in hand. So, clearly, to some extent, they are still looking to comply with court orders. But we have to see, does this behavior continue? I mean, that's one line of questions. Another is this use of the Alien Enemies Act legal, and is it going to be used against more and more people?
Yeah. I mean, Tom Homan, the president's border czar, has actually gone on television and said, we don't care what judges think about our authority here.
I'm proud to be a part of this administration. We're not stopping. I don't care what the judges think. I don't care what the left thinks. We're coming.
It seems incredibly provocative. I just can't imagine any other administration having an official utter anything like this and expecting the respect of their colleagues.
There's this deep-seated belief that has grown on the right that, they won this election fair and square. They won the popular vote. They won both houses of Congress. And so it is deeply, deeply anti-democratic that one single judge can halt an entire policy just by him or herself. Interestingly, when the shoe was on the other foot, they were suing left and right and having judges do the same thing under the Biden administration. The difference is in the past that administrations of both parties have complied with court orders, and that seems to be the new frontier that we're in now.
It feels to me, as an outside observer, that the immigration actions we're seeing over the last week or so are doing a couple of things for this administration. First, they look like fan service to me. If you can't do a mass deportation the way you promised, you can do showy deportations and get a lot of attention, and maybe that's fulfilling some need from someone, political need. It also seems like it's dialing up the volume on immigration almost to drown out maybe whatever else is happening. It's notable to me that this is happening at the same time that Republicans are saying no more town halls and have just faced a lot of pushback for all of the cuts and the firings that are happening at the federal level.
Oh, I mean, not to mention the thing that Americans care about most, which is the economy. I mean, the stocks have gone down. Everyone's scared of tariffs. People can't afford to buy eggs. People can't even find eggs. This is something that's really started resonating, I think, more than anything else, is that people are saying, wait a second, I thought Trump was going to make inflation better.
Yeah.
And the interesting question is, I don't know yet if it's not working, because the latest polls we've seen, the public gives Trump the single highest marks on immigration of any issue. And so at least until recently, this sort of showy display was at least partially having the intended effect.
Michelle, I'm really grateful for your time and your reporting. Thanks for coming on the broadcast.
Thanks for having me.
Michelle Hackman is a reporter in the Wall Street Journal's Washington Bureau. She covers U.S. immigration policy. A small update on this story. After Michelle and I got off the line, President Trump issued a dramatic post on Truth Social, raging about this case of the deportations to El Salvador. He also declared the judge in this case, like many of the crooked judges I am forced to appear before, should be impeached. Impeached was in all caps. This outburst seemed to prompt Chief Justice John Roberts over at the Supreme Court to weigh in. He issued a statement of his own, declaring, for more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. And that's the show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, Ethan Oberman, and Madeline Ducharme. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Go track me down on Blue Sky. Say, hey, I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.